So, hello everyone. My headshot wasn't there, but I'm Merlin. I am one of the Snapcrafters, and I'm also part of the Ubuntu Community Council. This is...
I'm Soumyadeep. I am a new member of Snapcrafters, but a very active one. I am a very new member of Ubuntu. I am a not so new member of Ubuntu Flutter Community, and of course, just looking around and contributing here and there in open source.
And then we also have...
Yes, I'm Till Kampeter. I'm not a Snapcrafter, but I'm what is much more recommended. I'm an upstream snapper. I'm leading open printing, and I have Snap cups and I have Snap printer drivers. And so it was not very easy to snap this stuff, daemons, system components. And therefore I got very deeply into Snap, which made me 2 years ago on the first Ubuntu Summit in Prague, creating a series of Snap workshops and organizing a series of Snap workshops with many different speakers. For example, Heather Ellsworth, me, and Lucy Llewellyn. She's now at our booth, yeah. And so on. And these workshops we have continued to develop. The first workshop I've given several times on many different conferences until this year in the UbuCon Asia in Jaipur. I've met Soumyadeep, and there he had submitted a booth, me the workshop, and then as it was his very first conference, and he was supposed to give here the workshop, I've invited him to give the workshop with me together. And I've mentored him a lot. I had 2 sleepless nights on the 2-day conference with him. And we have done together a great workshop. He has done very well. And now we are doing the workshop here again on the 3rd Ubuntu Summit here in The Hague. Let's go.
Yep.
So the way that this session is going to work is that we're first going to walk through an example snap to show you all the different parts of how you build a snap. And then the second part of this workshop is an interactive part. You basically have 2 or 3 choices. Either you continue on the example that we have and you try to build that and you try to figure out how to change certain stuff. Or
like if you have a snap, you want to choose, you want to try. If you have your project, you can try it now and we'll help you out with that.
We have a bunch of Snap experts here, not only us, but there's some in the audience too. So if you have a snap that you want to create for your own project, if you have an issue, during the interactive part, please work on that and put your hand up when you have questions or when you're stuck, and we'll be happy to help you. Maybe finally, as an introduction, so we all talked about Snapcrafters, but maybe not everybody knows who the Snapcrafters are. We're a group of volunteers who basically build and maintain Snap packages for third-party applications. Some of us are canonical employees. Me, Soumyadeep, are not canonical employees. The canonical employees mostly do it on their free time when they help us out. And we maintain snaps for Discord, for example, and for Signal Desktop. Those are in the store. To have a nice number, we have at more than 1.5 million weekly active users of our snaps.
And like we also created this contain snaps, the shared library for ffmpeg and webkitgtk that is maintained by us, and that will obviously help you and go through this journey. I think we are ready to snap like hell.
Yes. All right, so the first thing you need to do is you need to have the Snapcraft tools installed on your system. You basically need 3 tools. You need Snapd itself. If you're on Ubuntu, that's already installed. Then secondly, you need to use
Snapcraft. You need to install Snapcraft. And then you have to set up LXD with your machine and like We have given all the commands. You have a document in the walkthrough as a markdown file in a GitHub repo. Just follow it through and get along with us.
If you look in the description of this session, there should also be a link to a GitHub repo. This GitHub repo basically has in a document all the instructions and more information about how everything works. There's also a few links in our presentation.
You can also download the slides that are also linked in the description of this workshop.
Is it?
Yes. So, I added it. So, the example that we're going to show you is basically a snap for the GTK Hello World example. It's very small, but this is the application, basically. So, just to give you some context, if you would want to run this application on your own system, you're the developer, this is basically how you build it. You install like the GTK development libraries, you install a compiler, you compile the application, and then you run the application. So that's how the normal way to compile and install your application is. It's important to remember this because you will need all this information in order to create the snap of your application.
Right.
Because, so creating a snap is basically, you do that by creating a snapcraft.yaml file. And this file explains both how to build the application itself, so how to compile it, and then how to create the snap. It has a whole bunch of information in that file, like the metadata of your application, which specific binaries are part of your application, and how to compile the different parts of your application.
And so basically you get your manifest, you use Snapcraft, you build it, and you get the snap file, the file with an extension of .snap. You install it using the dangerous flag, and you get it on your system, ready and working.
So we're going to look at the GTK Hello World application that you can also see on GitHub. Maybe I'll wait like 2 seconds, so if you don't have the URL yet, you can take a picture of it. That is where you will find the source files.
I think they will also find it in the markdown document we had.
Yes, yes. Okay, so the first thing that this snapcraft.yaml file has is what we call the branding metadata. So this is what's basically visible in the Snap store to the users. It has a name, a version. Important for this version is that this can be a string. You can also put def here or something. This doesn't have to be a number. This is the user-facing version of your application. Then you have a summary, this should be 1 line, and then a description. This is a multi-line description where you can use like a little bit of markdown in order to have a beautiful description of your application.
Right. And of course, there's technical metadata explaining like how the snap will work, what the snap will use. There's base explaining like which Ubuntu base it will use. There's confinement, which defines the sandbox. Like, is it strict? Is it dev mode? Is it classic? And of course, the compression. It's a very important thing, but just use LZO.
So very similar to Docker containers, a snap is also a container, and inside of that container is a certain Ubuntu version. And so the base is basically the base Ubuntu version that's inside of this container. So for example, if you have an application that uses older libraries that works best on Ubuntu 18.04, well then you can just start from core 18, that's Ubuntu 18.04, that's inside of the snap. But then this container, this can run on any version of Ubuntu and any other version of Linux. So basically, even when a new version of Ubuntu comes out, you're not forced to immediately give a new version of your application that works on the newer Ubuntu. You can just keep using an older version of your Ubuntu inside of the snap, but then users of the newer version of Ubuntu can still install the older snap.
Right. And there comes the apps part. This basically explains what the thing that Snap will execute. You also get the thing that you add extensions there. The extensions basically use maybe GNOME, you use KDE. You explain that, okay, so I'm going to use this libraries. These are the shared libraries. I was talking previously about ffmpeg and all. This is also the shared library, but for GNOME or for KDE. And of course, the command that is the executable file that the Snap will run. And then the plugs. This is very important part. This is like, these are the predefined set of AppArmor rules in Snapd, and you declare it in your Snap that, okay, my Snap will need internet access, my Snap will need removable media access, like the disks, like the CDs, my Snap will need home folder access, and you just define it. Snapd will create an AppArmor profile for it using that declaration of yours, and your Snap is get ready to go for within a sandbox.
So specifically about the extensions, something that I want to add is, so GNOME is great for GTK applications. Use the GNOME extension if your application is a GTK application. The KDE extension is great for, well, Qt applications. But any other application will still work inside of a Snap. If it's a GUI application and it's not KDE, then I would advise to use the GNOME extension simply because it pulls in a lot of the desktop functionality. Right. So it pulls in compatibility with X11 and Wayland and stuff like that. Even if you're not using GTK for your application, it's still very useful to use the GNOME extension because that will ensure that you don't need to specify, for example, oh, I want access to X11, I want access to Wayland, I want access to the audio server. These extensions will do everything for you.
Okay, now this is slots. Basically, like it needs sometimes like need to access the session device. That's basically like you want to talk with the session in the desktop in your host machine. So yeah, you declare about it. You use the interface as dbus because this is a GTK application, so it uses dbus. And then the name is the unique ID of the app. That's like here it is org.gtk.example. And then the bus, it's a session bus because you are talking with the host session. And then you just get the app working, talking with the desktop dbus.
So very simple functionality, for example, because most applications will need this if they're using GTK, for example, because GTK uses it so that if you run multiple instances of the same application, then your application will know that. And so then your application can like start a new window inside of an existing application if it already exists. And that's why it needs this session dbus interface.
And now it comes to very interesting parts. So these are the dependencies of your Snap. Or like, for example, hello world GTK doesn't really need anything other than itself. So we just basically declare it there. There's a hello world GTK, we name it that, and then we use some plugins that is like basically how the way we'll build the Snap, and then we set the source, that is here in case our local directory, and then these parts are like overriding the build. We are using a custom script just to build it using GCC, and then we are placing it somewhere. And we are adding some build packages like the package conf to find the build libraries and all related. So there you can use various different types of like plugin systems like Mason and others. We'll talk about this later.
So let's go through it step by step. So plugin, this is basically which build system to use. You can create a Snap from binary packages. Like if you already have another build system that builds binaries, then you can just put that binary inside of a Snap using the dump plugin. Or if you want to build your application from source, you can use the Python plugin or the CMake plugin or the Mason plugin. There's like, I don't know how much, but like 20, 30 different plugins accepted. Or if there's not yet a plugin that does exactly what you want it to do, you can just write a bash script that compiles your application. Right. For this application specifically, since we're not using a build system, we're using the dump plugin with then just a shell script that calls the compiler. So source is basically where you get the source code before building. Right. You can get it from the folder in the repository where your snapcraft.yaml file is what we do here, or you can get it from an external repo or from a remote file. Yeah. And then, since we want to add our own compilation logic, we use override build in order to basically add a script in there that goes to the right directory and then calls the compiler and then builds it. And then at the end of this custom script, we can then still call the default logic for that plugin. Let's say you have a Python project, and you need to first do some patches before you can build it. Then you can use override build to first do the patches just in using a CLI script, and then finally using craftctl default in order to then run the normal Python build logic.
Right. And now, very important thing, another build packages. So these are basically your dependencies, like dependencies which are needed during the build time, like compilers, like SDK libraries, like the GTK4 development libraries, like the build tools, maybe CMake, Mason, whatever you are using, maybe Go, whatever you're using. So you add these packages in the build packages section, and these packages will not be included in your final snap that you will build at the end of this session.
Something interesting here is that, so we're basically talking about two different containers. We have the build container, and that's where these build packages are installed to then build your application. And then you have the actual snap, and build packages are only in the build container, will not be present in the final snap.
Right.
If you need certain libraries in your snap, because most applications use libraries, most applications have dependencies, you can add those using stage packages. So let's say your application uses curl, and you don't want to compile curl from scratch, because who wants to do that? You can just add it in stage packages, and it will get the curl package from the Ubuntu version that you specified earlier. So if you use core 20, then it will get the curl package from Ubuntu 20.04 and put that in the final snap so that your application has access to it and that it can use that. Very important here is that you only have to add the stage packages there that are not part of an extension. So I talked about the GNOME extension. If you want to do a GUI application, it's best to use the GNOME extension because that will already add some client libraries, for example, to communicate to X server, to communicate to Wayland. Already put them in your snap because they're all very low-level libraries that most developers don't realize that they're dependencies of their application. So by using an extension, most of the stage packages that your application need will already be there.
Right.
So this is it. Now it's your turn.
Make it a snap, and then let us know whether you get some problem, you fix something. Maybe try MarkTest, maybe try MarkNote. MarkNote is a KDE app. MarkTest is an Electron app. So basically, a hint: use KDE Neon extension for MarkNote. For MarkTest, use the GNOME extension.
Yes. So we also want to add, there's much more in the Snap ecosystem. If you already use AppStream for metadata, you have a way to import that metadata into the Snap description. Tomorrow, we will talk a little bit about how to set up a CI/CD system that will automatically check for new releases of an application and rebuild your snaps and then run your snaps and then create screenshots and then ask you via GitHub issue, do you want to release this version of your application? Please, it's an amazing tool written by a bunch of people who are here.
Yeah, John is here.
Go see the CI workshop tomorrow.
It will be us anyways.
So, good luck. I will go back to this slide because the URL is here. Get snapping and
let us know.
Ask us questions. We are here to answer your questions. You have a bunch of the experts here to help you build snaps.